Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at 10 ways to get the absolute best out of your Fender Stratocaster. So perhaps you've bought yourself a brand new Stratocaster, or maybe you've had one sitting around for a while that you just haven't quite bonded with. Well, today we're going to look at 10 things to get the best out of your Strat. Here we go. Let's start with number 1. Number 1, try lowering your Stratocaster pickups. Now this might seem counterintuitive to getting better Stratocaster tone, but unlike humbuckers, which you can pretty much raise as high as you want without any negative side effects, single coils are totally different. The magnetic pull on each pickup is so strong, if you raise all three, the strings are really going to struggle to maintain sustain as they get sucked down by all those pickups and really compress your tone and give you weird side effects. So try lowering all those pickups. Some people even play them almost level with their pickguard. Take your amp volume or your amp gain, crank it up to make up the volume difference, and you may notice your Strat sound suddenly goes from very narrow to very expansive with much more sustain. So that's my first tip. Try lowering your Stratocaster pickups for better tone. Should I float it? Should I deck it? Or should I block it? This is a huge question when it comes to Stratocaster tone and the trem system. Now, a few years back, I did a comparison between all three methods on the same guitar. I'll link to that above if you're curious. But since today we're talking about 10 ways to get the absolute best out of your Stratocaster, my recommendation would be to keep it in the factory configuration, which is a floating trem. So Strats come with a floating trem. That's the way they were designed to be. Now I think a lot of people get a little discouraged. They use the bar, the guitar goes out of tune, and they're like, well, I'm no Jeff Beck, I don't need to use it like that. And they just give up on it, or they deck it and block it. Not because they really want to, but because they're like, well, the guitar has to stay in tune. So my advice to you would be give the guitar a good week to break in all the parts, get everything moving together. So pick up your guitar, use the trem hard, retune it. Keep playing, use the trem hard, retune it day after day. And after a week, the whole system should be working together and your guitar should hold tune. You just have to persist through that first week. And I found that with most guitars. There's a rare case where a guitar will just hold tune perfectly. But most of the time there is a break-in period. So don't get discouraged because you could be missing out on a very expressive way to use your Stratocaster. The culprit is usually the nut. So if you have like a Squire version with a cheap plastic nut, you might want to put a Graph Tech on there or something like that. And that could make a world of difference as well. But yes, number 2, my recommendation, try floating it. Don't give up. You might really enjoy it. Here we go. Now that's better. Now recommendation number 3 is not taping your selector switch in position 4. That being said, since we're talking about getting the best out of a Stratocaster, if we gloss over position 4, well, we're missing a whole world of tones. So if you're the type of person that spends a lot of time in position 5 or position 1 and back to position 5, well, forcing yourself to use position 4 a lot will unleash some of the creative aspects of this Stratocaster. So try forcing yourself to only use position 4 for a bit, especially if you're playing clean, and it is one of the absolute iconic tones of the Stratocaster. So if you don't use it, give it a try. Now the 4th way to get the most out of your Stratocaster is the bridge tone mod. It's a simple jumper wire, so if this tone control does not affect your bridge pickup, it's a very easy mod. Take it to a friend who has a soldering iron, you'll be done in minutes, and then this tone control will affect your bridge. That's one of the ways that you can really get the best out of your Strat. Now, thankfully, a lot of the newer models come with this wired up. I think Fender heard us loud and clear. We're like, give us a way to control the bridge pickup. So it's really nice. Take it to 7 and it'll kind of match up a little more tonally with the neck pickup. So when you're switching back and forth, you'll just get a little bit more volume, a little bit more bite out of the back, but it won't be like completely like really nice and full to like thin and just like make your ears bleed. You can really control how much those pickups balance with one another. So it's a really worthy mod. So if you don't have that built into your Strat, consider doing it. It'll really give you more options. Number 5, try raising the height of your strings. If you're looking for those big Gilmore-esque bends where he can just slowly bend a string, give it some vibrato, and the Strat just rings and rings and rings and sounds amazing, but yours doesn't quite do that, try raising the strings. I set up my Strats and Tellies different than all my other guitars because Fenders are notoriously finicky for getting good sustain up above that 12th fret. So yes, it does make it a little bit trickier to play when you raise those strings up, but I really think it helps the Strat breathe and it gives it, again, more sustain, and yeah, just perfect for those big ringing bends. So if you're having trouble achieving that tone, try raising your strings up just a little bit at a time, resetting your intonation, and then yeah, trying those big bends up high, and you might notice a huge difference. Number 6 is the best Stratocaster mod I have ever done. Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about Strat Mods. I could talk about that forever, and really getting the best out of your Stratocaster shouldn't mean you have to spend a bunch more money on it. Thankfully, this is not very expensive. Now, these guys don't know I'm talking about the product. They haven't asked me to do it or anything like that. This is simply one of the ones I like the most out of all the Strat Mods I've done over the years on the channel. This is the 10-way switch. This is the Freeway Stratocaster 10-way switch. It can take a 3 single coil Stratocaster guitar and give you humbucking tones in the bridge, give you humbucking tones in the neck, and a bunch of other ones. It's really, really cool. It looks completely stock on a Stratocaster, which is what I like. It gives you your regular 5-way switch, then you go up a bank, there you go, and you got 5 more unique switches. And like I said, it looks completely stock on your guitar. So easy to switch between banks, and it gives you a ton more tone. So if you're going to mod your Strat, this one opens the whole guitar up to a bunch more tonal possibilities. It's not horribly expensive, and yeah, it's just a killer mod. So if you want to take your Strat, which is a very versatile guitar, and make it way more versatile, it really can turn it into a one guitar does everything kind of mod. So yeah, check this one out. It's awesome for a Strat. Now, a question I get asked a lot is, how can I play higher gain on a Strat? And my answer is, if you haven't bought it yet, get the humbucker single. That's one of the most flexible layouts. And if you use your tone control with the humbucker, you can really get some great tones for high gain. Now, if you have one like this, which is a traditional Strat with single coils, there's kind of 2 main options. Number 1, you can try experimenting with position 4 and position 2. Those are the hum canceling positions on a Strat. Now, it will not sound like a humbucker, but it'll get rid of all, that hum and buzz associated with single coils. So that's not an ideal solution, but again, if you use some of your tone controls with that, you can get some usable tones. But my main answer would be get a noise gate. That way you can use position 1, which is probably what you want to do if you want that cutting clarity for chugging and that kind of stuff, and pair it up with a noise gate. Now, thankfully, lots of amps have built-in noise gates that you can manipulate, but if you don't have one like that, just getting a cheap pedal, get a noise gate, and it will transform your Strat. Suddenly you can, hit it with a bunch of gain, and when you're not playing, that noise gate will just shut down and all the hum and buzz will stop, and then when you start to play, it opens up and you get your signal. So it just opens and closes, and it'll let you use your Strat in a more versatile way. So if you don't have a humbucker single, that's my recommendation. Experiment with position 2 and 4. That's free. You might as well just mess around and see if you can get some good tones. And if you can buy, there's lots of affordable noise gates out there as well. So if you want to play with high gain, those would be my recommendations. Now, the 8th way to get the most out of your Stratocaster is to use the volume control. Now, there's 2 types of Strats out there, one with the treble bleed circuit and of course one without. Now, the treble bleed just means as you back off your volume, it's going to keep the same tone that you have, the same amount of treble as if you're wide open. It'll just kind of like, as you back off the volume, it'll clean up your amp or the overdrive pedal or whatever you have, and then as you add your volume, it'll just increase the gain of your amp or pedal. It's a very nice effect. Now, I prefer not to have a treble bleed, even though this American Professional does have the treble bleed circuit. I haven't modded it, but I do prefer Strats without the treble bleed. And that means as you back off the volume, it also warms up your guitar. And that just gives a whole nother dynamic. So if you're playing with some, overdrive or doing some lead tones, and then you back off that volume to 7, 6, even 5, not only does it clean up that tone, but it really fattens it too. And I do prefer that. So my choice would be not to have the treble bleed circuit, but if you have it, that's great. They can be disabled very easily as well. But yeah, that's the two different options. And I really find that, yeah, if you're going from maybe a really fast, intense section of a solo or something like that, and then the band drops down, you back your volume up, your guitar fattens up and cleans up a bit, and you start to just do something a little more soulful. You hit your volume back up, and you're off to a more high tempo section or something like that. So it can be really, really dynamic. So figure out if your guitar has a treble bleed or not, and then try experimenting with that volume control. And again, that unleashes some of the great tones out of a Strat. Well, I hate to say it, but for number 9, add locking tuners. Again, it's a bit of a mod, and my contention is most Fender models should come from the factory with locking tuners. All their competition does. We're talking about like $500 to $700 guitars, like really competing with the Player series, and the competition has, roasted maple necks, graphite nut, or maybe even a bone nut, and locking tuners. All of those guitars in that segment competing with the Player series, they all have locking tuners. Now, this guy, my American Professional, standard tuners, I had to add lockers, and I bought the Fender branded ones. I really shouldn't have to do this, but at the same time, it makes life so much easier on a Strat and really any guitar. So yes, if you don't have locking tuners, it is absolutely a great mod. It makes string changes a breeze, super quick. So if you break a string and whatever, you're playing a gig, you can quickly put one on, tune it up, or if you just need to change all your strings or whatever, makes it life so much easier. And of course, you don't have all the winds around the post. So if you're, like I said, floating your trem and using your trem, all those winds don't slacken, then tighten, then slacken, then tighten every time you use your trem. So tuning stability could increase a little bit because there just aren't any winds around the post. So there definitely are some advantages. One of the most common mods to a Stratocaster. Should you have to do it? I say no. Fender, give us locking tuners on all your guitars. That being said, if you have an older model or a more affordable model, it's a great mod and I would recommend it. And finally, here's a mod that I don't think a lot of people do, but it can absolutely change the way your Stratocaster plays. And that's changing the number of springs on your trem system. Do you want something really slinky that you just barely have to float the bar and it'll modulate the pitch? Well, pull out the center spring and run with 2 springs. You'll have to adjust the claw, but once you're back in floating configuration, it'll absolutely make the stock trem really, really responsive. Do you want something that still floats but's a little bit more locked down? Well, run with 4 springs or go with a higher spring rate. So you can change the spring rate with just buying different springs. You can experiment with a number in the back, and it's going to totally transform the way the bar floats. So it takes a little bit of kind of going back and forth with adjusting the claw and changing the springs, but once you're in the sweet spot, man, keep your guitar like that and it'll absolutely make it amazing. Thanks so much for joining me. If you guys found this helpful, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Other than that, all the gear I use, tab store, t-shirt store, down in the video description below. You can check it out if you're so inclined. Other than that, have yourself a great day. Take care.